For the first 19 years of my life, I kind of thought all this black-on-white violence, black-on-white hostility was normal. It was so normal, I didn't even kind of call it that. It was just, to use the popular feminist metaphor, I was the fish who did not know I was swimming in water. One day our neighborhood was white, next day it was black. So everybody moved out except my parents, who still, who died in that house. Now my brother owns that house. Now that's where I stay when I am in Wilmington, Delaware. Sometimes but when I got to be 19, I left Wilmington, ended up in San Diego, California. And it took me about 6 months to figure out that there was something different about San Diego. I just knew there was something different. I just never really put my finger on it until one day I looked around and said, there's no real racial tension out here, at least not the part of San Diego I was occupying, which was the downtown and the beach areas and later other parts of the city. It just wasn't, the black on white thing wasn't really an issue. I now know it's because the percentage of black people in San Diego is much smaller than basically every other major city, perhaps with the exception of San Francisco. I was thinking about that when I came back to Southern California, where I'm making this podcast right now. I'm out here on some family business. And I was sitting out on one of my friend's front lawns last night around 10 o'clock, working on a video, if you must know. And I saw some people walk by. They were walking dogs, They had these like fluorescent collars around their dog's neck. And they're very cool and everything. And this is a middle class to upper middle class neighborhood. I ask people around here. I've asked my friend over the years. I say, do you know anybody that's ever heard a gunshot? Do you know anybody who knows anybody that's ever heard a gunshot? What about burglaries? What about robberies? What about kids getting beat up at school? What about kids getting beat up to school or from school? Is that something people talk about around here? And my buddy didn't grow up in this town. He grew up in another town, not too much different from Wilmington, Delaware. And he said, no, nobody around here has a clue about what the rest of this whole country looks like in certain pockets where there's a lot of black on white conflict. As I was thinking about that, as I was making one of my videos, I think you saw the video with, it looked like I was, had a flashlight on my face. I thought that actually turned out a lot better. The lighting turned out a lot better than I thought it was going to turn out, by the way, even though for the next 30 minutes after I made those videos, I was walking around looking at a big black ring in front of my face. Anyway, so I'm just sitting out there. It's like, this is the most peaceful, tranquil place you could possibly imagine, drinking a little coffee, smoking one of my cigars. All of a sudden, the car pulls up. This could have been a car from good old 26th Street in Wilmington, Delaware. That's how much rap music was blaring out of it. And somebody opened the door. They got out with their skateboard and skated down the street. I didn't really pay that much attention to it, other than I knew that wherever that kid lived, he didn't live near where he got dropped off, whatever that means. And I think he was a white kid. I don't know who was in the car. I'm guessing it was white kids, but I don't know. But the music was but it was rap music, full on heavy gangster rap, hip hop music. As soon as they pulled up, all I heard was F-bombs, N-bombs, and people talking about, my nigga, we're gonna kill people. Really, my nigga, we're down with mud. That's all I heard. So F-bombs, N-bombs, and murder bombs. Wow, what a strange place for that little flower to like grow in the desert. But once I moved out here and lived out here for 35 years, I thought, I didn't even think about it anymore. It just kind of disappeared. I'd go back to visit in Delaware, but not for very long. And this whole racial violence thing that was such a big part of my life as a kid, it just kind of disappeared and faded away. But then, and I thought that was normal, not having any racial violence or threats of racial violence be kind of a central organizing feature of your life. But anyway, I ended up back in Delaware for an extended period of time, mostly because I was doing a radio show with my brother, and all of a sudden this stuff was this enormous amount of violence and hostility and denial, deceit, and delusion. It was staring me in the face every day. It was like every day was like a bucket of ice water. It was not normal anymore to me. But everybody that was around me, it was normal. That's just the way it was in Wilmington, Delaware. That's the way it is in lots and lots of places all over this country. This high level of black criminality, this high level of denial, deceit, and delusion, that's just part of life there. And that's why I got so interested in writing about this and talking about it and doing videos about it. And really I just keep every video, we're just kind of asking a couple questions and saying a couple things, which is, 1, did you see that? 2, do you really think that's normal? 3, do you know there are entire places in this country where this is not even on anybody's radar screen? And 4, why are you in such denial, deceit, and delusion about what a ridiculous level of crime and violence does to a once small, thriving town or a big town? And also every video, every podcast, every word of every book also really challenges people to say, listen, if this isn't happening, if white people are doing it too, if white people are deserve it, well, let me know, will you? Because I haven't seen one person really convince me of anything else, of anything even coming close to that. So I was thinking about that last night while I was watching the dogs with the collars go by and the kids in their cars on a very quiet residential neighborhood. And it made me think about one thing that we heard a few days ago from Leslie Stahl. I don't even watch 60 Minutes anymore. Maybe that's why that little segment stuck in my head so much. But do you remember when she kind of like asked the education secretary at least a couple questions about Obama's, about Obama and how he saw everything through the lens of race? This wasn't her question. Everything through the lens of race, including the disparity in schools between black students and white students and Asian students, and how any disparity meant one thing only, that was white racism and institutional racism. Let's give that clip a listen.
She's now considering scrapping the Obama-era guidance on how to identify, avoid, and remedy discriminatory discipline, which aims to prevent schools from punishing students of color more harshly than their white classmates.
We are studying that rule. We need to ensure that all students have an opportunity to learn in a safe and nurturing environment. And all students means all students.
Yeah, but let's say there's a disruption in the classroom, and a bunch of white kids are disruptive, and they get punished, go see the principal. But the black kids are, they call in the cops. I mean, that's the issue, and how the kids who disrupt are being punished. You see this disproportion in discipline for the same infraction as institutional racism.
And so there's Leslie Stahl asking this question about white racism, white institutional racism, and being inflicted on black people for no reason whatsoever, because everybody knows, all the studies show that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. Especially why people like Leslie Stahl feel like they can go on 60 Minutes and make these statements without worrying about whether they're accurate or not, because they know no one's going to challenge them. Who's going to stand up in the public square? I mean, we do it every minute of every day here. Who's going to stand up in the public square? Who else is going to stand up and say, listen, Leslie, the reason there's such disparity between white kids, black kids, Asian kids in school is not because the teachers are all screwed up and not because everybody's picking on black people. No, the reason is because these, as bad as the numbers in school are, where black people are being suspended and expelled three times, 5 times, 10 times more often than white students, 100 times more often than Asian students. As bad as those numbers are, the real numbers are way worse. Who's going to stand up and say that in the public square and risk being removed from the public square, risk having their career ended? Who's going to do that? Well, nobody. Leslie Stahl knows that. That's why she can get on 60 Minutes and repeat that little fairy tale about institutional racism between black kids and white kids, and she doesn't know any better, because as nice as this neighborhood is, as much as this neighborhood is far, far away from any kind of racial conflict between black people and white people, I mean, Leslie Stahl is like 1,000,000 miles away. So I'm looking at her picture right now. You can see this at minds.com/Colin Flaherty. If you want to see her picture, she's all earnestly looking at Betsy DeVos, wondering why Betsy DeVos is so out of touch with the fellas and the lovely ladies, how the Secretary of Education doesn't really know nothing about this whole thing, because Leslie Stahl knows it all because her producer just did a Google search and whispered it in her ear. Well, here's what's getting interesting. What's getting interesting is that more and more people, and I don't even think they're aware that they exist, that each other exists. I think they just think they're out there doing it by themselves. More and more people are starting to call BS on the greatest lie of our generation, the greatest hoax of our lifetime, the lie of black victimization. And so more and more people are starting to do this, and we're going to hear from a couple of them in audio and in print during this podcast. And maybe it'll be a little boost to you when you think that the only people out there talking about it are you and me, when it's really, there are more people talking about it. And I'm trying to, what my contribution is, in my own humble way, is I'm just trying to keep my contribution not to causes and solutions and theories and fanciful, wishful thinking. I'm just trying to make one statement which says, yeah, that's happening, Leslie. There's something really weird happening, Leslie. And I see it all the time where I live. I see it all the time on videos all around the country. And a lot of people, when they're in the middle of this, I've talked to so many people that grew up just the way I did. And I keep asking them, like, did you know this was happening to anybody else around the country? And it never occurred to me to ask that question. It never occurred to any of them to ask that question. So we're going to hear from a few of them. But before we do, why don't we just go through a couple of audio from a couple of clips from some black violence in schools very, very recently, because man, it's so easy to get theoretical here. It's so easy just to talk about the causes and the solutions and to forget what the stakes are. To forget what kind of nasty business is being visited upon students, teachers, faculty, neighbors, lunchroom workers, bus drivers every damn day. And people like Leslie Stahl are wandering around in a clueless haze, which used to be just comical, but now it's kind of dangerous. Let's get to a couple of those clips.
St. Paul Police, 2 high schools, and the Minnesota State High School League are all looking into a big fight that happened Friday night. Take a look at this. This is some video that a viewer shared with us of that fight. It happened at St. Cloud State University right at the end of a high school basketball game between Minneapolis North and Brooklyn Center. Police say the players and the fans were involved in this. It took about a dozen officers to clear the gym. Officials say there are no reports of assaults or injuries. There were no arrests.
Valley High School student has been charged with assaulting a school resource officer. Police say Lamont Hobbs III punched the LMPD officer and also assaulted a staff member at the school. This happened yesterday during a discussion about a possible suspension. Hobbs is set to be arraigned this morning. He is facing multiple charges, including assault, terroristic threatening, disorderly conduct, menacing, and resisting arrest.
And a student get into a fight at a local high school, and the entire incident is caught on cell phone video.
And this video is actually making the rounds online. The Palm Beach County School District telling us investigators are looking into a fight earlier this month between a substitute teacher and a student from Palm Beach Lakes High School. The teacher's name has not been made public. The school district will not say if that teacher or student are still in the classroom.
Joining us, I'm Dan Harlan. A student at Grand Rapids Catholic Central High School is now charged with 4 counts of criminal sexual conduct involving 2 female students. Cameron Cross was in court this morning. WZZM 13's Noah Fromsen was there, and he joins us now with the latest.
Both of these alleged assaults happened at Catholic Central High School between February 14th and March 14th. The 2 accusers reported this to the school administration on Friday. Catholic Central called the police, and Cross was arrested in the parking lot that same day after dismissal. One of the charges is a felony for penetration of one victim. That's a maximum 15-year sentence. The other is assault with intent to commit penetration. That's a maximum 10 years. His bond was set at $50,000 and a no-contact order with the 2 victims. Cross will be back in court for a probable cause hearing on March 27th.
And we had a similar story down in Alabama. One of the fellas took a gun to school. It went off. A white girl got killed. Maybe it was an accident. And we just did this story in Ohio, but it was a weird story because you see a bus driver on the sidewalk. He's having a confrontation with a student, like a high school student who just got off the bus. And he's taunting the driver, and the driver basically didn't want to take it, and all his friends around are taunting him too. And so all of a sudden, the bus driver and the kid are swinging at each other. All of a sudden, the kids come up and they jump the bus driver and beat the hell out of him. Of course, on TV, they go, well, we're still waiting for the results of the investigation to see why those 6 black people jumped on that bus driver and almost killed him. So that's the kind of denial, deceit, and delusion we're faced with every day. But, there's so much happening in schools. And we've talked a little bit about this before, but it's worth reminding people that so many school districts are essentially controlled by the teachers' union. I know it's weird, but that's the fact. The teachers' union, there's so many school districts in this country. Some of them are kind of small. Doesn't take that much to put up a candidate. Take some money out of the teachers' union political action fund, sprinkle it over the electorate. All of a sudden, voila, you got people who love teachers sitting on the school board. But they don't just love teachers. They're kind of down with the entire cause, right? It's not just that teachers are great. It's also the other cause is that, all the things we talk about here. It's black victimization, white racism. It's, the whole thing. But at some point, it might be happening right now. It's not really a sustainable situation because no matter how much the teachers want their little schools to be a valhalla of racial harmony and peace because, they're down with the cause, and isn't the cause going to be down with them? Every day we're seeing incredible amounts of violence in schools. Every day in school districts around the country. We're going to look at Buffalo and Minnesota and New York and one other one. We're going to hear from teachers. We're going to hear from teachers who are saying, our schools are out of control. I mean, almost every minute of every day. And these are teachers who are teaching in black schools. And no matter how much of these schools are out of control, these teachers just can't bring themselves to say it, that they have a problem with black children in their schools. The same problem that cops have when these kids leave the grade school, high schools, and they go out on the streets. Everything's about defiance. Everything's about white racism. Everything is about violence. And everything is about turning around and not taking any accountability for it. Everything is about blaming other people for your own shortcomings. We see that all the time. Let's begin out in Buffalo.
Hundreds of teachers in Buffalo public schools say student behavior is out of control. That's the findings of a new survey from the Buffalo Teachers Federation. News 4's Angela Cristoforos joins us live in the newsroom to break down that report. Angela, kind of shocking.
Yeah, more than 1,200 teachers from Buffalo Public Schools participated in the survey. This 21-page report shows more than 30% of those teachers say that student behavior is out of control and leading to unacceptable learning conditions.
How about if I do it from here?
69 Buffalo Public Schools responded. More than 80% of the teachers who participated believe that discipline and suspensions are underreported. The report also includes anonymous statements from several teachers, like this one from McKinley High School that reads, quote, "There is a student in the 9th grade who disrupts and is removed from every one of his classes each and every day. He lunged at a pregnant teacher today. He has been suspended before, but now we, quote, just have to deal with it." Buffalo Teachers Federation President Philip Rumor says it's a multifaceted issue and something must be done to stop it.
City Hall is saying, look, we want you to reduce suspensions. So the principals figure the way of reducing suspensions is to not report them and not suspend. They're trying to look good. That does not help the student that has the disruptive behavior or the rest of the students who are trying to learn.
Rumor says there aren't enough alternative programs and school psychologists and counselors. He also says the restorative justice practice in Buffalo Public Schools is not enough to combat the students' behavior issue. Now, we're told that a copy of this report has been sent to the school superintendent, and we actually just got a report from Buffalo Public Schools. I'm going to read it to you from my cell phone. It says, quote, "The district has not heard the claims in the BTF report from any principal. We know that 90% of Buffalo Public School students possess an extraordinary need that requires a level of direct and indirect supports and professional development for teachers." It went on to say, district staff will review with building level leadership, Buffalo Council of School Administrators, the recently released BTF report. You can find the full survey on our website at WIVB.com.
Man, we've done a lot of stories out of Buffalo. I remember the story we did out of Buffalo where where it was the Buffalo, I think it was at State University in Buffalo. And a bunch of fellows were raging through the campus over a long period of time, beating the hell out of the students. And the chief of police of the campus and in Buffalo came out and had a press conference and explained in this real convoluted language that people talking about. The guy who was using the convoluted language was a black chief of police. He was explaining that the white students come from outside the city and they're going to have to get used to an urban environment of Buffalo. It's amazing how much in upstate New York, there's a whole bunch of places that are just chocolate cities, chocolate school districts, and one big, fat, hot chocolate mess constantly. I'm thinking of Syracuse, thinking of some places in Albany, thinking of all these little towns up there, Utica, thinking of Rochester. Everybody up there thinks it's normal. You know, we had the same kind of story that appeared in the Journal Sentinel in Milwaukee. It was, the last couple weeks. And the headline is, "Educators Speak Out on Behavior. Why No Consequences? And Where Are the Parents?" Well, I tell you right now, I'm kind of over the asking that question about where are the parents, because there are no parents. Okay? There are no parents. I used to talk about this with Marlon Newburn. A lot of you guys remember Marlon, the great former prison psychologist, court-appointed psychologist. He also had a lot of experience in education. And when Marlon was a teacher or a principal, he would call up the parents of a black child and one of two things would always happen. Call them up and said, "Hey, Jamal's misbehaving a little bit. Think he can come in and we can talk about it?" The parent would say one of two things. One, that's not, when he walks out the door, he becomes your problem. Why are you bothering me? Or two, the only reason and the more common one, this message is often delivered in person, is Why are you picking on Jamal? I know why. You're only doing it because Jamal is black. Do you know any teachers? Do you know anybody that knows any teachers? Ask them. Let's hear a little bit from Milwaukee. This guy's I think he works at some kind of educational think tank at Marquette University in Milwaukee. He did some kind of study of teachers. He wanted to find out what their life was like in schools because, when he was probably seeing the same videos we were seeing, which shows that black schools are an enormous amount of violence, mayhem, confusion, and worse. So he talked to a lot of teachers, and here's what he found. Quote, here's a quote from a teacher. You enter the cafeteria with a smile at breakfast. Immediately, you spot one of your students in the corner crying. In another area of the cafeteria, you see two of your students fighting. You go over to break up the fight. After arriving back at the breakfast table, you see two more students upset. It is Monday after all, and the trauma that occurs in the homes has escalated. After breakfast, you arrive in the classroom trying to smile and show students you care. During the morning meeting, one of your students shuts down and kicks the table. While you are talking to him, he explains he received no birthday present or cake yesterday for his birthday. You give that student a prize from your prize basket you stock every week. 7 more students trickle in late in the first hour. 5 of them are hungry. Okay, you know what? I'm sorry, teacher. Listen, you've probably been in the classroom a million years. I've been in the classroom for 12 years, just the time I was in school. But I will tell you this, you're getting played. Everybody knows, every black person knows how to play a white person in authority. Oh, my parents, man, we got problems at home. My grandmother died. My dad lost his job, or, this person got arrested. I had to go to see my uncle in jail, or my cousin got shot. There's a million excuses. And it's kind of a contest, right? It's like, who can come up with the most creative excuse? And this teacher's getting played over and over and over. Coming in late. Oh, we're hungry. Well, listen, if they were hungry, they would have been at the free breakfast that the school gives out. And that is a fact.
Do shit that make you happy. Go out and get you some white friends. Get you some white motherfucking friends. You ain't gotta sleep with them, but you gonna need them motherfuckers. If you go to jail and call your nigga friends, these motherfuckers will interrogate you more than the goddamn police did. They had your ass on the phone. Where the fuck was you at? What the fuck was you doing? Why the fuck you ain't called me? Not your white friends. Them motherfuckers will be there by the time you hang up the phone, and they'll be madder than you. Just what the fuck did he do? Murdered who? Look, I fucking known him for 2 weeks. He wouldn't fucking do something like that. Gotta love white people. I don't give a fuck what you say. White people are friendly. You can call them motherfuckers up at 3 o'clock in the morning with the wrong number, and they won't even be mad at you. They just, hello? No, I'm sorry. No Shaquita here. Well, what number did you dial? No, it's a 9, not a 7. We'll try it. If it doesn't work, call me back. We'll figure this thing out. Gotta love white people.
And so it goes on, and he goes on and on, described for more and more teachers. Here's another quote. I have control over my classroom most times. Sometimes I have no control over emotionally traumatized children, parentheses, black people, parentheses. I talk a great deal to my students. We talk about good choices every day. I model what I expect. I am kind to my students. I hug them. I tell them I love them. I spend a great deal of time trying to look for root causes of behavior, period. It isn't enough. You know what the root cause of their behavior is? People like you who constantly make excuses for them. I mean, that's what a teacher is, right? When you go to teaching school, you have this vision of, you want to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. And if you can just give that student, that black student, some love, some care, some attention, some good old-fashioned reading, writing, and arithmetic, they're going to put aside their evil ways, their ghetto ways, and they're going to do something like they do in the movie and go to Harvard and win the Nobel Prize. That's what these teachers think. And so they don't set standards. They don't hold anybody accountable. They look for root causes. Wow. We're going to hear a little bit more about that in a minute. There's another teacher talking. If you visit our school during any given day, you will find students in the hallways. Most of them are angry. Some of them have learned it is okay to stay in the hallway because there are no consequences. You will see children fighting, students climbing shelves, hanging on hooks, throwing chairs and tables, lots of yelling, lots of crying, and paraprofessionals trying to handle all of these situations. That's a grade school he's talking about. And all the teachers are wondering why there are no consequences. This is a good article. And I'm sure this guy Borsek who wrote it is a fantastic person. I don't know. He may or may not be. But at some point, I mean, in Milwaukee's a chocolate city now with chocolate schools. And we've done millions of stories on Milwaukee. I've got lots and lots of emails, lots of stories from Milwaukee. The title of my first book, White Girl, about race, White Girl Bleed a Lot, came from Milwaukee. Milwaukee's different than Laverne and Shirley, skipping down the sidewalk singing, hip-hop songs from the 50s. And none of these teachers know it. They can't get their mind around it. Instead, they live in this living hell they've essentially created for themselves by letting by allowing this whole school systems to tolerate this ridiculous behavior because everybody knows it's all about white racism. And if you stand up and say, no, it's not about white racism, I expect all my children to behave this way, that way, this way, that way. No, you're not going to get any support. You're going to get fired. One of the people that spends a lot of time in Wisconsin is our old buddy Glenn Singleton, the guy who's head of the Pacific Educational Foundation. He wrote the book Courageous Conversations. And that's the manual. That is the most popular manual for white teachers on how to teach black children. And so Glenn Singleton goes all over the country and he does a couple of states. He does California and Wisconsin, or at least two of the states. I think he does Massachusetts too, and a few more states on a statewide level. So Glenn Singleton, he'll walk into, what they do is they have seminars. So he'll have a room full of white teachers. He walks in and he goes, okay, we're going to have a courageous conversation now. And everybody goes, oh, great. This is going to be fantastic. I'm really going to get a chance to express my feelings, ask a lot of questions about what's going on in my class, how I can get control of it, what's up with black people, why are they ruining the school? That's what they're thinking. So Glenn Singleton looks him in the eye and says, okay, here's the courageous conversation. You have to be courageous enough, yes, you, white teacher, have to be courageous enough to admit that your white racism, it's what's ruining this school. Jaws drop. People look to the floor. They go, oh man, I know what I'm in now. I know what I'm in for. If I stand up, put my hand up and say, hey, I don't think I'm part of the problem. I think I'm part of the solution. Glenn Singleton will get you fired. In school terms, technically that means you won't get your contract renewed. A lot of that, we talk a lot about that and don't make the black kids angry. That's how they roll in these classes. That's how white teachers roll in black schools. Nobody's going to stand up to the Leslie Stahl and say, listen, the reason there's so much difference between black and white students is because black students are off the charts when it comes to behavior and grades. They don't care about grades. They don't care about consequences. We can't do anything to them to make them behave and stop interfering with the other people, however small that number of students is who really want to learn. That's Wisconsin. You ever been to Wisconsin? It's kind of, I wrote a lot about Wisconsin in my book, Redwood to Deadwood, 53-year-old dude hitchhikes across America again. upstate Wisconsin might be the prettiest darn place in America. Now, basically, we got the same kind of story coming out of Minneapolis and Minnesota. And we've done the reason we do stories about places like Milwaukee and Minneapolis is because, at least to me, I was surprised when I heard about all the black violence, mayhem, and chaos in the schools and in the cities. And, the towns are pretty much identical on who runs the town. You got a bunch of white liberals, you have a smattering of black people, but they all kind of get together and they all agree that everybody in town is racist except for that, white guy who's mayor or whatever. But man, Minneapolis is crazy now. Let's blow through this story from, I think she's a teacher. So this person's name is Catherine Kirsten. She's a senior policy fellow at the Center for the American Experiment. She wrote this big column, well, not a big one, it's actually kind of a short one, but it packs a lot of meaning. Headline, Undisciplined, Chaos may be coming to Minnesota classrooms by decree. This is dated March 19, 2018. A state agency aims to eliminate racial disparities in schools' response to misbehavior. Its destabilizing course would only spread disruption. Here's the beginning of the article. Brace yourself, parents of Minnesota. Here's what's coming soon to a school near you. Increased violence, brazen challenges to a teacher's authority, and a chaotic environment where learning is an uphill battle. Does any of that sound familiar? Oh, that was me talking, not the author. Teachers who try to exert control will find their hands tied, and some kids, no longer accountable for their behavior, will feel free to provoke mischief and mayhem. If this happens at your school, you'll be able to thank the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. The reason I'm going through this is because I wouldn't expect you to believe this if you didn't hear it from the newspaper. I wouldn't expect you to believe it. I wouldn't believe it if I didn't see it. If this happens at your school, you will be able to thank the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. In the fall of 2017, the department sent out letters to 43 school districts across the state announcing that the schools are under investigation because their student discipline records suggest that Black and Native American students are disciplined at a rate that exceeds their proportion of the student population. No, nobody's suggesting that. That is a plain fact. Black students are disciplined 3, 5, 10, 100 times more than white students and Asian students. And they went through the usual numbers. Every school district is doing this now. It's kind of a hangover from the Obama era. Let's see how long it sticks around. Here, their numbers are 31% of the state's students' population accounted for 66% of school suspensions and expulsions. I think they were talking about Black and Indians, mostly Black people. Let me see. Here, in essence, is the state's position. The primary cause of racial discipline gaps in schools is racist teachers and discipline policies, not differing rates of student misconduct. I mean, this is exactly what we just heard in Milwaukee. So people are starting to figure it out, and they're starting to speak out. Schools must move to end these statistical group disparities. If administrators don't agree to change their practices in ways that reduce Black and Native American discipline rates, the state will come in and sue your ass. We've seen this movie before. We've done a lot of stories in St. Paul public schools. There, it had devastating consequences for students of all backgrounds. These educational bureaucrats were the only people in St. Paul who were not paying attention to this debacle. In St. Paul schools, as virtually everywhere in the country, Black students, as a group, are referred for discipline at higher rates than other students. Starting around 2012, Obama's Excellence in African American Education executive order, but really a lot of it started before then, right? I mean, the day they took office in 2009. The district leaders tried to narrow this gap by lowering behavior expectations and removing meaningful penalties for student misconduct. For example, they spent millions of dollars on white privilege training for teachers and dropped, quote, continual willful disobedience as a suspendable offense. There's so much written on what's happening in Minneapolis, so much written about all the white privilege that kids are taught or learn about, all the white racism they learn about starting from kindergarten. Anyway, the article continues. Violence and disorder quickly escalated after this decree. In some schools, anarchic conditions made learning difficult, if not impossible, according to teachers. Echo of 100 videos we've done here and on my YouTube channel over the last couple of years. In December 2015, after a vicious attack by a student, covered here, left a high school teacher with a traumatic brain injury, the district attorney in that county labeled the trend of violence a public health crisis. You remember the guy they're talking about. I'm pretty sure this was the kind of a big guy. He had kind of a blonde crew cut. By that time, suspensions, which had initially fallen, had surged to their highest rate in 5 years. Black students, about 30% of the student body, were 77% of those suspended. The teachers' union even threatened to strike over safety concerns. By 2016, the school board voted out the superintendent. She might have been the worst one in the country. There's a few others that are giving us some competition, but eventually, when they hire these new superintendents and they come in and they start lecturing the school board, they start lecturing the parents about how much they suck, how much white racism is ruining black kids in their school, and the black violence goes up, the scores goes down, and they keep asking for answers, and all they get from the superintendent is more and more how much you suck, more and more and more. Well, that's not a sustainable situation. Then they talk about how the state is basically going to replicate this throughout the entire state, not just St. Paul. And they say they're probably doing this because the federal government seems poised to back off on enforcing Obama-era race-based discipline guidance. By the way, that wasn't guidance. Every teacher in America knows the stuff coming out of Washington was not guidance. They were rules. They talk about how all this stuff's happening under a shroud of secrecy. They're not really talking about it much. A lot of the parents don't even know that their school district is under the gun. And this person's calling for, this person's calling for more openness, stuff like this. And she makes some obvious arguments, but they're obvious, but they're not made enough. So let's just go through that part of it. But consider this, nationally, white boys are suspended at more than twice the rate of Asian and Pacific Islander boys, while boys in general are suspended much more often than girls. Is that because teachers are biased against white students and boys? Or does it reflect real differences in conduct? She goes on to throw you numbers crunchers, you numbers freaks, you ready for this? For example, young black males between the ages of 14 and 17 commit homicide at 10 times the rate of whites and Hispanics of the same age. Behaviors that lead to criminal conduct are also likely to produce school misconduct. Tragically, see, this is one thing, we don't do this. We don't throw in the tragically, sadly. We just say, listen, this is what it is. The tragic part is not the people committing the crime. The tragic part are the people who are victims of the crime, people who are victims of the ruined school. Anyway, she says, tragically, the black students' discipline rate is most likely higher than other students because, on average, they misbehave more. See, we don't put all the weasel words in there. Most likely, on average. Good Lord. And they quote some study from a guy in a group by J.P. Wright at the Journal of Criminal Justice saying, listen, this racial gap doesn't account for anything. The people who are being suspended for damn good reason. And if 2 kids are being suspended for committing the same thing, I don't even accept there is such a thing as the same thing. But if 2 kids are suspended in a different way for the same thing, this guy says it's because they have a different history in school with misbehavior. Okay, on and on and on and on. I mean, so that's Minneapolis. People are talking about that. Of course, this article came out like yesterday. Within 12 hours of it being on, they had 2 other teachers. They come out and the first thing they did is they start firing. It was kind of a short rebuttal, but it wasn't really a rebuttal. It was just like, well, I can't believe your paper printed this racist and cherry-picking piece of crap that, had all these unproven things in there. They just went on to, just make all these ad hominem attacks without refuting even one single thing anybody said, other than, they kind of alternately went back and forth between A, black people are not misbehaving in school, so why are you suspending them? To B, black people misbehave like hell, but there's a good reason for it, so let's not suspend them. Daily Caller had a piece on this, and here's by a guy named Rob Shimshak. Again, I'm just, more and more people are starting to figure out you can speak out about this in a plain fashion. You don't have to apologize. But so many of us are so out of practice. We're not used to talking about this. When we start talking about race and crime and racial dysfunction on epic levels, we just trip over ourselves. We trip over our own feet. We start generalizing. We start stereotyping. We start using hypotheticals. None of these things are persuasive, and all of these things bounce back to you and reduce your credibility. That's why we have to avoid those things. That's why we avoid them here. And it goes without saying, no obscenities. No obscenities or vulgarities either. No racism, no rancor, no apologies. I think it's called City Journal. I'm pretty sure that's Heather McDonald's home base. It's kind of a conservative think tank in New York City. And Heather, of course, has written lots of really terrific academically oriented books that sometimes she kind of transforms into something for more of the popular culture, where she's calling BS on just the whole, and much of the same things we call BS on here. She doesn't speak as plainly about it as we do. She's not calling it the greatest lie of our generation, but she did. I think one of her books was A War on Cops, where she talks about violence, cop violence on black people, and saying the reverse was way worse. Black violence on cops was way worse than cops on black people. And she reminds everybody, when a black person walks out of their house, they don't have to worry about some white cop with a nightstick. They have to worry about a black person. They don't have to worry about some dude with, starch white sheets hanging over his head and shoulders. They have to worry about another black person with a gun. That's their problem. And so there's an article here by Kay Heimowitz. This is a few months old, and the title of the article is Unsayable Truths About a Failing High School. And it's kind of a personal story with my favorite mode, a personal story, filling it in with the blanks and with lots of raw information and other stuff. She talks about where she went to school in Montgomery County in Philadelphia, and a video that went viral about a student brawl, a large-scale episode of black mob violence, where 4 security officers and 8 teachers were hurt. They bolstering long whispered rumors of the district's decline. No, we're not whispering anything here. We're shouting as loud as we can. There's just something really weird happening in schools that is ruining schools by the hundreds. She talked about how they were arrested, how she went to school in that same place a while ago, and it's a little bit different now. It really became clear, she said, almost immediately that the brawl was no one-off. Quote, "Really, we have experienced this kind of fight our entire high school career," said the student council president. "We complained. We never got any response. We were told all disputes were personal and the school was safe." "Why now? Why all the attention now?" she asked. "Because a video of it was leaked to the media?" Students, one after another, came up and described threats of rape, stalking, kids sent back to classrooms after menacing teachers or classmates, teachers walking past fighting kids, security guards looking the other way. The problem, students insisted, were not limited to high school. They remembered thuggery in middle and even elementary school, too. There's no way to chalk up these complaints to adolescent theatrics. So to her credit, she starts talking about, all this violence in school, really kind of a black thing. And so really, if you look, this stuff's starting to, get out more and more, especially now that the gang and the Obama administration are not there churning out these fairy tales about racism causing this enormous problem in schools, when if anything, it's the opposite. It's white people and white teachers are victims of this enormous level of black hostility and black violence that is ruining schools. 16 high schools in Baltimore, nobody can read above a third grade level. Translation, nobody can read at all. That's what that means. Do you have any idea what third grade level means in a public high school in Baltimore? I mean, that means, when you go to use the restroom, by the way, that's the most dangerous place for many white kids, any kids of all kinds at a high school, black high school. When you go to use a restroom, it's kind of like 50-50 whether you're going to choose the right restroom or not. Hopefully they have very graphic pictures of what the what restrooms for the boys and what restroom is for the girls. Man, there's, when I think of these stories of people coming forward and talking about what's happening in their chocolate schools, in their chocolate school district, I think of the one we did last year, but we just posted here a few weeks ago, from Baltimore. And I think of the newscaster saying, listen, we've been looking at this for a long time, and there are 4 teachers who are assaulted in Baltimore City schools every day. Every day. And then we met a few of the teachers. I mean, this one teacher we saw, he basically he's taking lots of sick days where he just kind of goes into a closet and turns on the lights and just kind of vegetates in the dark. And when he does go to school, nobody's learning anything from that guy. I promise you. We had the same story in St. Louis. You remember, this one went right by a lot of people. Do you remember, everybody remembers St. Michael Brown of Ferguson. And even when his, when they were going through the sanctification of St. Michael Brown, who I think may have spent a little bit of time on the football team, or for no other reason than he was such a big kid. They had the football team take a moment of silence or something like that. The next day, the superintendent of the whole school district, a chocolate school district, suspended 20% of the kids from the whole damn district. 20%. Just told them to go home. That's how much it was out of control in those schools. Same story in St. Louis. Same story in Memphis. In Memphis, we saw a story about a black teacher standing up, and because this teacher spoke decent English, good English, and she wanted to teach them reading, writing, arithmetic, not rap, hip-hop, and songs about money, drugs, guns, bitches, and murder, she was ridiculed as being a white person. She was called every single female epithet in the world. She went up to the school board and just said, hey, I've had it with these kids. Nobody's learning anything. You know it. You're letting them get away with it. How many of these stories do you want? How many of these stories do we need before the Leslie Stahls of the world start to figure something out is going on in school except for institutional racism? How many, Leslie? When's 60 Minutes going to put a camera in these classrooms? When's 60 Minutes going to talk to the teachers? When is 60 Minutes going to go into the jails and the prisons and talk to the people who have beat teachers, who have assaulted teachers, who have killed teachers, who have raped teachers? Need any help with the video, Leslie? I'll give you a whole bunch of it. 60 Minutes is supposed to be the greatest news magazine in the world. These are the people that have the greatest researchers in the world, so they say. And they let Leslie Stahl walk onto that set and ask some BS question about how black students are constant victims of relentless white racism? Wow. Okay, that's kind of the extreme mainstream point of view, but I'm just telling you, pay attention to these other stories we just talked about. There's a lot more out there where a lot of people are starting to stand up timidly at first and a little stronger at second and even stronger on and on. When they're telling the truth about what's happening in their classroom, they're telling the truth about how the people on the school board are clueless, the people on the superintendent is not telling the school board what's going on, how she's the one letting everybody lower the standards, get away with all this BS that's ruining the schools, all because they just don't want to make the black kids angry.